welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on this edition of IPWatchdog Unleashed. We have a special guest this week. We have somebody who is, I suppose, a politician in some ways, but much more than a politician. She's one of us. She's a lawyer, and now she's working as the executive director at the Office of Research and Commercialization at UNC Charlotte. We have Laura Peter joining us today. And those of you who know Laura know that prior to her going to UNC Charlotte, she served as Deputy Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and Deputy Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office when Andrei Iancu was director during the first Trump term. So it's a pleasure to have you joining us here today, Laura.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's a delight.
Well, it's good to talk to you. And, and as I was reading your title, I think, to the best of my knowledge, that is the longest title. The only longer title would be somebody who had that same position and was acting, because then you would get the word acting twice, right?
It's true. I think it is the longest title in the Plum Book, which is the Bible for politicians, if you will, that are appointees. I do not consider myself a politician, though. I consider myself an IP aficionado who's been in government, academia, and industry for 30 years. So,
yeah. Well, before we get to, actually, maybe that's a good place to start. Tell us, how did you find yourself at the patent office? What road did you travel to wind up being deputy director of the patent office?
Well, first of all, I was born and raised in California. I'm a fifth-generation Californian, and my dad was head of patents and licensing at Hughes Aircraft Company. So I grew up around this, even though I never dreamed that I would become a patent attorney ever when I was growing up. I was very interested in technology, so I got my engineering degree from Cornell. And then I was very interested in how technology and policy intersect. So I went on to get my master's at the University of Chicago in public policy studies. But I quickly realized you don't earn a lot of money in government, and I have learned that since to be true. And so I went on to law school, banked my law degree, and then went on to get my master's of law in England, working under one of the great copyright lawyers there, and then returned to come into private practice for many, many years. I was working along, I was managing litigation, general counsel of publicly traded companies, and so on. And we had this giant case against a big company, and we hired this law firm. We hired Morgan Chu at Irell Manila, and I met this young man named Andrei Iancu. And he and I had very, very similar philosophies, very, very similar strategies. We won the case and life moved on. And, 10, 15 years later, I saw he became director and I said, "Hey, Andrei, congratulations. This is so exciting." Shortly after that, he said, "Will you come and help?" And of course, I jumped at the opportunity because it brought together my policy background, and also coming to the PTO to me was going to the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz. It was this great, glorious place, and it still is, where patents are protected and intellectual property is protected.
Yeah, and for somebody on it's on the other side of the aisle, Todd Dickinson, I'm sure or knew Todd. Unfortunately, we lost him way too early. But he told me something very similar to what you just said. He said, every day that I drove to work at the patent office, he said he was excited because he knew he would have the opportunity that day. He didn't know what it would be, but to do something that mattered for the system.
It mattered, and people believe in it. And I will say, for the most part, our field of intellectual property is pretty nonpartisan. I've had, good conversations with the previous administrations and so on. And so I think we all believe in our heart that intellectual property is important. And of course, it is instilled in our American ethos in the U.S. Constitution. So I think we all hearken back to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Hopefully we'll have some time to talk about that, because I think everybody is in favor of innovation. I'm not sure everybody has the same definition of what innovation is or what that even really means. But before we dive into that and really kind of roll up our sleeves, why don't you tell everybody what you're doing now at UNC?
Yes, indeed. So I came off of the deputy directorship at the USPTO, and I had to kind of sort myself out and think, what do I want to do? And I had thought about going back to industry but I didn't want to do something so narrow. I think when you're in the PTO, it changes you, or changed me anyway. I can say that I wanted to do something bigger. I wanted to have an impact. And so I started looking around at universities, and I found this opportunity at UNC Charlotte, where they're up and coming. They're moving to R1 status. They are moving up in the U.S. News World and Report ranks. How do I say that 3 times fast? And they're really powering up in their research. So I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity. And I hit it off very well with the Vice Chancellor John Daniels. And I said, look, here's what I can do. I can come and keep the wheels on the bus turning for technology transfer. That's the heart of the job, making sure the patents get licensed out to industry and so on. But I can bring 2 more things. One is bringing an innovation and entrepreneurial mindset to the faculty on campus, bringing in speakers, educating faculty and researchers about what intellectual property is, why it's important, where it comes from, and what it can do for them. And then the other thing I can do is elevate UNC Charlotte on the national and international stage as far as an intellectual property player. So we joined the National Academy of Inventors as an institution straight off. We got our first National Academy of Inventor Fellow inducted, which is so exciting. We won the Collegiate Inventor Competition at the USPTO, which was amazing to me. We placed in the top 5 nationally, and it was our first try at doing this. We also placed 3rd. One of our researchers placed 3rd in the international PMU, it's called the Saudi Arabian Competition for Patent Awards, and she placed 3rd in the world for this competition. So bringing that acclaim, bringing that knowledge, because I think if people hear about what's going on at UNC Charlotte, they'll really want to invest in us and invest in our research, and also bring the research out to market where it deserves to be.
Yeah. Rising tide lifts all boats. So the more that you can do to shine light on what you have going on there with your faculty is, I think, a good move. It's and sometimes it's frustrating to me. I've been on the periphery of the technology transfer world for a long time, and at the very beginning of my career, I suppose I was really in it when I was at teaching at Syracuse University. We had a pretty innovative setup there, created by a guy named Ted Hagelin. And he had an interdisciplinary class, really. We had engineers, we had business people, we had folks from the law school, and they did essentially consulting projects for university startups, and then also for some startup companies in the central New York area. And they would have these technologies, and we advise them about what it was that they where they might be able to go with them, where the market was ripe, where it was not ripe, what protection we thought we could get. And it was great experience for the students, and it was really great for the companies too. And so I know firsthand that there is a way to go from 0 to a meaningful program if you really want to do it. I just, unfortunately, it's not going to throw anybody particularly under the bus, but I think too many universities say they want to do this, but then they don't back it up. It doesn't take a ton of resources, but it does take a commitment, and it takes some resources.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that the researchers really want to do this, but they're not skilled in the business, and they don't know where to look, and they don't know how to market themselves. So another small thing I've tried to do is, I guess I've always tried to do this, is when I'm filing patent applications, I take a careful look at the claims and try to think about the applications for them. And of course, talk to the researchers to make sure I'm on, the right track in my suggestions. But those claims become a marketing vehicle to say, here this technology is, it can be applied in all of these different ways. So then when you get the potential licensees looking at the write-ups and all that kind of thing, they go, maybe this does work. The other thing UNC Charlotte is trying very much to do is to bring industry onto campus and help guide our researchers in certain directions. Of course, they have freedom to research what they wish, but maybe they can be nudged in a particular direction that's more applicable to certain industries than others. So I think that that's kind of a useful thing too. But you're absolutely right. Researchers are extremely gifted and valuable in what they do, but they may not be the best marketing people and the best CEOs, and that's our job.
Right, absolutely. And they also maybe want to share things a little too early before you've established the footprint you need.
Yes. How many times I said, don't publish that paper quite yet. Give me a few days to get a patent application together.
Let me at least slap a cover sheet on it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, yes. And there's that tension between academic freedom, which we value and encourage, but then also this other side. I tell researchers, look, you may want to give your stuff away for the benefit of humanity, and that is fabulous, and that is your choice. But wouldn't you like to make sure you have a patent on it so your name is associated with the four corners of what your invention is? And they go, oh, well, it's in a paper, isn't it? Well, paper, there's so many papers out there. This at least defines what is yours.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is it's just a reality. Maybe it shouldn't be this way. It just is. And I think it is also, it strikes a lot of people who aren't familiar with the industry as counterintuitive. But if you don't have a patent and you can't own the innovation, then getting it to market becomes extremely difficult, maybe even impossible, because increasingly the innovation that we want and need costs a lot of money to go from the lab where your folks are and others at universities are coming out with the basic science to translate that into a commercial science,
Yes.
to get it into the marketplace. That takes a lot of time and investment. And if nobody owns the patent, then you can't possibly invest in that. And I think that's a key piece of the puzzle that's often missed.
I absolutely agree. I think I coined this word, although I'm not quite sure I did, and that is assetization of your intellectual property. When you file a patent, you're actually creating an asset that can be monetized. And that means a venture capitalist will see that you have an asset and it can actually give you money because they see you own something. So, there have been many papers about the venture capital community and how basically you cannot get any venture capital money unless you have a patent. And that's, I think, just kind of shifting gears a little bit to the whole march-in rights issue. That's why that became such a giant threat, is if you get a patent and the government is allowed to take it, basically for any reason that they wish because they don't like how much you're charging, that undermines the whole value. And can you get a venture capitalist to take the risk of investment when they know it can be just taken away on a whim?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I know we're when we're recording this, Robert Kennedy's vote for confirmation has not yet occurred. He's made it out of committee. Maybe by the time everybody's listening to this, he will either be the secretary or we'll know he is not going to be the secretary. But it was refreshing to hear in the Q&A that went on, and I think it was also in written questions, that he says that really supportive of Bayh-Dole and says that it is not a price control mechanism.
Yes, indeed. I was actually thrilled to see that. And I believe that the Secretary of Commerce appointee Letnick is similarly inclined to say, look, marching in taking patents under the Bayh-Dole Act, taking patents from federally funded research is wrong and counterproductive to the cutting edge technologies that we need to be supporting to cure cancer, to support new forms of energy, and all of these wonderful scientific discoveries that can't really be done anywhere else but in a university.
Right. And that, could you speak to that maybe a little bit more? Because I also think that there's just a fundamental misunderstanding in the public. The public, I think, sees, the universities, they get grants from the federal government. And so the federal government has already paid for this invention. Why should we have to pay for it again twice?
Yeah. No, that's actually very untrue. So, first of all, universities do get federally funded research grants, and they are a blessing, and they usually will kickstart research. So they'll get the ball rolling, but very, very often there's industry research that goes along with that. Industry partners come in, industry investment comes in, and so it becomes a partnership on developing that technology down the line. Then when it gets to the patent stage, okay, you've got an asset. That's wonderful. Now, what are you going to do with it? Well, that's where the technology commercialization comes in to try and get it out the door. Get it out the door into the hands of industry experts who know how to get it through all the regulations of the FDA, know how to get it through the energy EPA, all of those other things that have to be done for our standards in America and for society. And then also make sure that it gets out to market and actually onto the shelf. So I think that there's a whole investment process after the university. And if you don't have the money being invested to that 3/4 of the path after the university research, all of these wonderful cutting edge technologies will sit on the shelf and die.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's also a concept in the technology transfer world of the valley of death. And that's where so many of these great inventions and great ideas just go to die. Is because the federal government, the way I always try and explain it, is they provide the seed money to do basic scientific research that nobody could otherwise justify. Because you may find nothing, you don't know. And even if you don't find anything, that can be useful scientific information. Like Edison used to say, I didn't fail, I found something that didn't work. But it's just highly speculative. And then as you progress, then the university gets less and less and less money from the federal government, to the point where you get nothing. And now you've got to traverse this valley of death, and which is just lack of funding to commercialize this and get it to a place where it actually can get into the market. And so many people just don't understand the economics of this whole university innovating startup to commercialization and market.
Well, and it goes back to what we were talking about before. It's not only getting the venture capitalists to invest in it to help raise the value or build a bridge over the valley of death. Let's put it that way. But it's also the expertise of the researchers in the university. They are not equipped and not trained. It may not be their, life choice to go out into the business half of things. So they're the two pieces to that. And if you don't have people who are willing to invest their time and resources as well as their money to cross that bridge, it's going to die anyway. And then if you threaten the potential payoff with, capricious taking of IP at the, 10 years down the line, why in the world would you ever invest in university research if it's going to be so easily taken?
Well, you couldn't, because most of the investments don't go anywhere. Most of the investments lose money, like overwhelmingly, like lose money. So if you're going to take like the 5 or 10% that really make money and say, oh, well, you're making too much money, we have to take that back, then you're never going to get the investment in any of this stuff.
I absolutely agree. And my hope is that once RFK and Secretary Lutnick get installed, confirmed, that they will actually withdraw the guidelines that are floating around NIST right now and put an end to the possibility of this March-in right proposal.
So does it shock you? I mean, there's March-in rights, right, that constantly, it seems like every year, come up. And every time up until just under the Biden administration, when NIST looked at this favorably, the NIH has said no repeatedly over the decades. But does it surprise you, one, that the issue of March-in rights continues to come up? And two, does it surprise you that Bayh-Dole critics want to just throw it all away and start over or revert back?
It does. I don't get it. I mean, I kind of speculate as to why. I think that patents are a little bit mysterious. There's they have a lot of mystique around them. They're the rules get very complicated. I hope we talk a little about subject matter eligibility. It's kind of been made a mess. It's all over the map. And then there are certain sophisticated practitioners of patents who seem to extend the life of certain technologies under patent. That's not entirely true, but that perception out there influences what's going on. And of course, we have a drug pricing crisis in our country, and everyone's trying to look for a solution. The point is, though, that attacking the patent system and using Bayh-Dole and attacking Bayh-Dole is the wrong tool for a noble cause. And I think the thing is, we just need to keep, pounding the education out there that our founding fathers in our Constitution said patent rights, the rights of inventors and the rights of authors are so precious to our economy and our Constitution that we are going to protect them within the Constitution for a limited period of time in exchange for the inventors and the authors actually giving those rights to the public when those rights expire.
Right. Yeah. And I do think that the drug price issue, as you raise it, kind of really muddies this water. Because most people look at that and say, oh, well, the patents are the problem. Patents aren't the problem. The problem is everywhere else in the world has price controls. So the pharmaceutical companies sell into those countries and can charge practically nothing for them. So they charge to recoup their R&D in the U.S. So the U.S. consumers are subsidizing the drugs consumed by the entire world.
Absolutely.
And we have a trade problem. It is not a patent problem. It is not an innovation problem. It is a trade problem.
I absolutely agree with you. I'm not quite sure how you fix all of the healthcare systems around the world for them to recognize that if you don't actually pay a fair price for these drugs and invest in them, you're not going to have new drugs coming out. And that's the whole theory here. If you start imposing price controls in America, you will have the limited amount of drugs that we have in existence today at a lower price, but no company's going to spend the billions of dollars needed to bring some of these drugs to market.
Right. So the message here is not to let the U.S. government, institute price controls, because then we don't get, as you say, any more innovation. We won't get any more drugs. I think the solution to lowering drug prices is, and this would seem to be straight out of the Trump playbook, at least the second term Trump playbook, is to really require the rest of the world to pay their fair share.
I agree. Talk about paying your fair share. It would be nice if that were to be able to come to pass.
And then it would reduce the price in America, because the whole world is paying for the research and development of these life-saving.
Well, and think about what I'm seeing coming out of the university are capabilities to create personalized medicine. I mean, it is so exciting and it is so cutting edge. Your particular gene structure, there's one little gene that makes you more inclined to get a certain kind of cancer. Well, we can use this personalized medicine to prevent you from getting cancer. Oh my God, that's phenomenal. Well, why is anyone going to try and invest in all of that tremendous amount of research still yet to be done if they can't, get any more investment in it and can't actually make it materialize?
Well, and interesting that, you say that. I may have an answer for you, like, as not necessarily that question. I don't know that you can have an answer to that question, but to this thing that we're talking about is we did a one of these chats with a friend of mine, Louis Foreman, who actually is in Charlotte. If you don't know Louis, I'll introduce you. You should know him. He was on PPAC. He's a prolific inventor. I think you have to know Louis, right?
Yeah.
So during that conversation I had with Louis, he said something like, I think it was like 87% of Americans work for somebody else. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it was in the context of, risk-taking in startups and entrepreneurship, and in which he teaches entrepreneurship at Wake Forest. And so that means that 13% of Americans are really starting businesses or businesses.
Right.
And I think if you start a business, you own a business, if you have to sign the front of the paycheck, not just the back of the paycheck, you understand a little bit more about the risk and the putting your own money on the line to make this all happen. that I wonder why not everybody gets it, but I guess not everybody has that common experience. They go to work, they get paid, they do a job, they get paid. They don't go home at night or go home on the weekend and wonder, am I going to have enough money in the bank account to make payroll next week?
Well, if I remember correctly, my statistic may not be right, but I think 60% of Americans work for small businesses.
Yeah,
So they may be
there's
a
a
little
lot.
bit closer to it, but these may be more service businesses as opposed to product creation businesses, which require a lot more investment. And then you get people that are taking home their paycheck and feeling a little bit more remote from actually the finances of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know what the solution to that is. There may not be an easy solution.
Well, one thing is that you do this wonderful podcast
Yeah.
and you're out there talking about intellectual property and bringing it down to more reality. And that's what I'm trying to do in the university too, is remind people why this is important, what it can do for the economy, what it can do for you personally. And that helps hugely. So thank you for your
Sure,
service.
no problem. That was what I was going to say. The only thing I think we can do is talk about it and try and get through. I do think that people like you have a much more easy in, though, in some ways, because universities such as UNC are everybody loves university. Everybody loves their local university, right?
Yes.
And when you have successes in the laboratory that can then translate into startup businesses that start in your own community, and it starts to employ people, and that kind of organic grassroots from the ground up, I think really does matter. And that's why it is sometimes frustrating to watch universities kind of flail at this. And I think there's a way to do it, and it's not to say that it's easy. But there are a lot of really great researchers out there, and lot of really great talented tech transfer people.
Yes.
And I think with if universities, just generally speaking across the board, put in a little bit more resource, and maybe it could even be just as the president or chancellor or vice or provost, talking very positively about these things, and
Yes.
all of that will be a tide that rises all the boats.
So let me just say that our chancellor is very supportive. Our vice chancellor is hugely supportive. We are having our big invention of the year celebration. It's our inaugural invention of the year. I did this event. It's a big, huge project, but I'm just absolutely thrilled because we're going to be honoring our researchers and highlighting them to the community, to industry in the community. I have judges from the PTO, from Bank of America, from Honeywell, all these companies that are right located here so they can see what we're doing. And we really are celebrating them. The former director, my former boss, Andrei, is going to come down and do the keynote. It's that important, and the chancellor is going to be there supporting it as well. So kind of creating that community where we really do want to highlight how important patenting is to innovation. We're doing our best.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you inviting me to come to that. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it this year because of my schedule, my calendar, but I will be there next year because these types of events, I've attended several of these over the years across the country. They're just great events. They're feel good events, and it really does impact the community of researchers, and it makes everybody feel better about what they're doing. And
Yes.
when you see those like Andrei and judges and bigwigs from local companies there, it raises the profile.
And I had one of the chief IP officers of a big company headquartered here say, Laura, I had no idea what UNC Charlotte was doing. This technology is phenomenal. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell you. So that, just that information that they can be proud of UNC Charlotte as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So before we run out of time here, I want to go back to what you said. You were wanting to talk a little bit about subject matter eligibility, which, as you know, I think is just a mess, but I'll give you the floor. What are your thoughts on 101?
Well, let me just go back a little bit and say under the first Trump administration, our motto was stable, reliable, predictable patent system. And that was huge. And we really made a big effort to stabilize it by giving clear guidelines to the patent examiners and also talking about it in a pro-patent, pro-innovation way. In the second Trump administration, if I were writing things, I would change it slightly to be stable, robust, and reliable patent system. Because I think right now our patent system has not been able to accommodate a lot of the emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, medical diagnostics. These things are critical. They're moving at warp speed. If we want more advancement in these emerging technologies, we need to give them more protection under the patent system to create that greenhouse so they can grow. People invest, and then we go into that whole virtuous cycle we talked about just a little bit earlier. So I think the robustness is super important, and I think that the PARA Act that has been promoted by Senator Tillis would be a huge step forward in allowing a lot of these emerging technologies to be better protected. And so I'm a huge supporter of that. And I think that's one thing we could do to help fix the system. And then the other thing to do is to make the guidelines for the patent examiners a little bit crisper. I think the last administration made a start. I think there's more to be done there, though.
Yeah, and I also think there's a lot there. I'm obviously supportive of one-on-one reform, and the future is AI and other critical and emerging technologies. Quantum computing, AI is never going to realize its full potential if we don't have better, faster, stronger computers. That's why quantum is so interesting. And then there's all kinds of adjacent technologies, right? We got to get better, smarter about energy. And in the meantime, that means we need to rely on fossil fuels, just like everybody else in the world does. China, India, everybody
relies. We develop our other energy sources in parallel. So
right,
we're moving the whole thing forward. But yeah, we can't just go cold turkey when we're not ready for it.
Because without energy, these promising critical and emerging technologies just are not going to happen, and they consume energy at a much higher rate than I think almost anybody really realizes, unless you've really looked at it and studied the issue. So there's that we got to get right for that reason. But then yes, there's also, I just have a hard time understanding why in the God's name do we not allow medical diagnostics to be patented? Because if you can't diagnose the problem, you can't treat the problem. It's just that simple, right? And with medical diagnostics, and I tell people this and they look at me like I'm crazy, but it's the God's honest truth. The way to get a medical diagnostic patent is to add a treatment step. Well, that makes it not a diagnostic. That makes it a treatment, and you can't know how to treat it until you know how to diagnose it. It's like, I feel like this is an Abbott and Costello routine. And I just think it's terrible that the courts and Congress, not all Congress, because Senator Tillis and Senator Coons, and there's several people on the House side as well that really get it, have been trying to do something about this, but I don't understand. I mean, what am I missing?
I don't understand either. It seems, and I do think PARA does open the door to that by saying, look, if these are processes to come to a conclusion that can only be done with massive amounts of computing power and that kind of thing, of course they should be protected. So there's definitely a window there. I think we're missing out on a lot of wonderful possibilities. Again, this whole step toward personalized medicine, you have to actually figure out what the gene is that's causing the problem, and then maybe you could fix it, right? So, and this is not something that can be done by your family doctor, back in your small town anymore. So I really don't understand. That's why I'm a huge supporter of PARA, and I really hope it takes flight. We have a new counterpart to Senator Tillis in Senator Schiff. I know that he is a copyright supporter, and so I think that is a very positive step. We'll see how he comes out on patents. I am not familiar with his philosophy on patents.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know yet what he really thinks about patents, because he is very supportive of content creators, copyright owners of all sorts, which is not surprising. That's his district. He's from the LA area. So would make sense that he would be better briefed on those issues of the greatest importance to his own constituency. So hopefully now that he's going to be the ranking member in the Senate IP committee, he'll be able to work with Senator Tillis, and they'll be able to reach across the aisle and do some things. Of course, then you still have to deal with Senator Grassley as the Judiciary Chair, who is historically not wanted to do these types of things, which is why we did a program here, a PTAB program recently, and one of the things that we had Dave Campos and Judge Michelle and Chris Israel were all on the panel, and they all agreed that if President Trump really wants this to happen, if he were to get engaged, that could make all the difference in the world. He wouldn't have to do more than make maybe one or two phone calls, and then let Howard Lutnick be empowered to be his messenger on this
I was
issue.
going to say, Howard Lutnick is a huge supporter of cryptocurrency and blockchain. So PARA directly feeds protection for those kinds of emerging technologies. So I think there actually may be a path to that. And maybe we can convince Senator Grassley to support this more.
Hopefully. And I think Howard Lutnick being the Secretary of Commerce is great. I don't know, certainly not in my lifetime, that we've had a Secretary of Commerce who had this level of familiarity with the patent system going in to the job. I mean, he's a prolific inventor. He's made millions of dollars, and he has been stung by the Alice bug.
Yes, he has.
So he gets it.
He had most of his patents were in the financial business modeling area and also computer science area. And so he definitely was affected by Alice. And that's why I'm hopeful that he will put his weight behind supporting PARA and as we said, maybe help to get some energy behind it getting passed.
Yeah. So the last thing that I mentioned at the very beginning that hopefully we'd have some time to talk about is this idea of what it means to be innovative. Because I think, the sides that, for just not pejoratively, but the pro-patent side versus the anti-patent side, just as a quick way to describe the two camps, are like ships passing in the night. They have different definitions of innovation and what it means to be innovative. What does the word innovation mean to you?
I think it's being creative and actually actualizing it. And it goes back to the Lockean principles of property rights. As you sow, so shall you reap, right? That you as a creator should be able to reap the benefits of your innovation. And if your innovation has more merit, you may reap more depending upon your skill and level and your investment in it. I think I had been in mid-level companies in the $1 billion range, not the billion and not the small. And we were wielding patents, but we were also attacked by patents. So we were right smack in the middle of the big companies and the little companies, and not all patents are equally weighted. So from that point of view, from the anti-patent point of view, I kind of get it that you don't want to be attacked all the time because it gets expensive and annoying. But however, if you really have added to the innovation and made a new successful product, you should be able to reap the benefits of that. And so your property can be a small lot or it can be a big lot. It kind of depends upon the investment that you put into it and the novelty.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you that, it can't be a situation where America's largest tech companies are simply viewed as an ATM, so that those who acquire rights that are maybe questionable, or they're stretching them by a mile because the rights that they do have and the patents they have purchased simply don't read on what some of these companies are doing. And they're still showing up. They're still sending demand letters. They're still harassing them. That can't happen. That can't go on.
It's cheaper to pay them off sometimes than it is to fight it.
That is a huge
It's a
problem.
huge problem.
And that was, I thought, what we were trying to do when we created the PTAB. And so I just think increasingly the PTAB has failed. And it's not an indictment of any of the judges who I think are looking at each case as it comes to them, so on and so forth. I'm not saying that the judges have failed. I think the whole system has failed because that extortion level activity continues to go on. Where people
Yes.
are just trying to hold up these companies for $10, $20, $50,000, realizing that it's cheaper for them to pay that than even hire a law firm.
So it seems to me that the PTAB is having an identity crisis. It was sort of thought in the original days to be a second look at what the examiner had adjudged as patentable. And if it is that, then it should be a very high standard to be able to overturn a patent, right? A patent should be presumed valid, in my view, if that's what it's designed to do. It's kind of morphed into a small claims, for lack of a better word, small claims type situation at court where plaintiffs can go and defendants can go and adjudicate validity in a smaller field, which is less expensive. It'll cost you $500,000 instead of a couple of $1 million in court. I don't know that that is the right place for it. If it were to return to being that second quality check, where you have a presumption of validity, quick and dirty, then I think it may have some value still.
Yeah, and I agree. I think what I've started trying to get across to people who don't like the PTAB is every system needs to have an error correction mechanism. Okay, so getting rid of the PTAB is just a non-starter. I think re-envisioning the PTAB is something that we really need to do because I just don't think it's working the way that we wanted it to work. Because I think the weakest patents, the weakest ones, the chains here in the links in the chain, are ones the PTAB never sees. Because you can't pay $500,000 to $1 million in legal fees to fight a patent where the demand is $25,000.
Correct.
I mean, that's a quick and easy way to go out of business. Really, you can't do that. But now at the same level, what winds up happening is those extortion artists who buy these terrible patents or patents that don't at all relate to anything that the company's doing, they never get looked at.
Correct.
And
You're
and
absolutely
that's
right.
the group of patents that most need to be looked at, not the ones that they're looking at now. So I don't blame the judges. I blame the way the system is set up. There needs to be a way to go after these truly low quality patents and get rid of them and take them out of the hands of those who are just through arbitrage ruining the system.
Well, and I think there were efforts to try and get some vehicles to do that. They just haven't taken off. And these folks with weak patents tend to be well funded because what they'll do is they'll go to a whole bunch of different companies, get them each to pay $25,000, and then suddenly they've got a war chest.
Yep.
And they can actually fight these things. So I'm
Yeah,
sorry
and it's a great investment, right? I mean, because it only costs a few $100s to file a federal complaint. And if you can flip that to $20,000, $30,000 every time, nuisance value, that's why that marketplace exists, because they make money doing that. And I think, and then consequently what winds up happening is the people who wind up bearing the brunt of the PTAB are the ones who have good innovations where there's a lot of infringement and it's worthwhile to fight over. And it just seems like can't be the system that we want.
No, it can't be. And there absolutely needs to be some reform there. And I actually sat with judges on panels, and they are diligent, they are earnest, they are trying very hard. They also are using high legal standards, though, too. I remember one case, the defendant didn't have a third-party expert witness. And I turned to the judge and I said, those cost a lot of money. This is a small case. They can't afford to do that. Well, they had to value the statement of the individual who had written the declaration less because it wasn't an expert third party. And that's kind of not fair. So those kind of things are infiltrating the PTAB, not because of anything mean, but they're trying to be at that high level, and maybe that's not the role that they should be playing.
No, I agree. I think what we need to do is we need to have a full, fair, frank conversation about what it is that we want the PTAB to be doing. Because if I had my druthers, they would be doing something different.
I think that's right.
And but I also don't think that we can't get rid of them. I mean,
it's also, when you're trying to change the wheels on the bus while it's in motion, or whatever that expression is, it's pretty hard. And this has become a vehicle. And so I think some of the efforts like the Prevail Act and so on have tried to turn that ship a little bit, but I'm not sure they're going to get the traction they need to, just because it's an incomplete solution.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. This was a wonderful talk. Thanks for joining me.
Well, it's such a delight. I'm always delighted to talk with you and hear all your good news and what's going on in the IP world from your perspective. So thank you for inviting me.